Asterisk, 65-year-old Rajendra couldn't sleep for months. Every night, sharp cramps would claw at his legs, leaving him exhausted, until his granddaughter stumbled upon an old diary hidden in his attic. What was written inside didn't just reveal the cause of his pain. It exposed a secret his body had been screaming about for years. Asterisk. Rajendra rubbed his calves, wincing as another spasm shot through his legs. The doctor had said it was just old age, but the pain felt deeper, like something inside him was fighting to be heard. That's when little Mira, digging through the attic, found his late wife's diary. A page fell open. He still blames himself for Arv's accident. I see him limp more on Sundays. Rajendra froze. Sundays were when he visited the river, where his son had drowned 30 years ago. His legs hadn't been cramping from age. They'd been screaming from guilt. Rajendra's hands trembled as he stared at the diary page, the words blurring through his tears. The cramps in his legs suddenly made terrible sense. Every Sunday, his body relived that awful day at the riverbank, muscles tightening as if still trying to stop little Arv from slipping away. But just as he started connecting the dots, Mira gasped and pointed to another entry further down the page. The doctor said his potassium was dangerously low after the funeral. He refused to eat properly for months. Rajendra's breath caught. Could his current agony really stem from both grief and something as simple as missing nutrients? His mind raced. Had his decades of neglecting vegetables, his reliance on tea and toast, unknowingly fueled this pain? That night, he dreamt of Arv laughing under the mango tree, but the vision twisted into his son handing him a banana with a knowing smile. He woke with a jolt, heart pounding. The diary had given him the why, but the real shock came the next morning when Mira dragged him to the kitchen, where an unexpected visitor waited. An old friend of his wife's, a retired nurse who just happened to drop by with a bag of ripe bananas and a knowing look. Leela always said you'd need these one day, the woman murmured, pressing a fruit into his palm. Rajendra peeled it mechanically, but as he took the first bite, his fingers brushed against something hard tucked beneath the banana's stem. A tiny, folded slip of paper with his wife's handwriting. The nurse's eyes widened in genuine surprise. She hadn't put it there. Rajendra's fingers fumbled as he unfolded the brittle paper, his pulse roaring in his ears. The note contained just 7 cryptic words. Check the neem tree before monsoon. His mind flashed to the gnarled old tree in their abandoned village home. The same tree under which Arv used to play. The nurse clutched his arm, her voice urgent. Leela made me promise, if you ever found this, you must go before the rains come next week. Rajendra's legs throbbed violently as if responding to the message, the pain now carrying an electric urgency. That afternoon, despite Mira's protests about his health, he boarded a rickety bus to his ancestral village, the diary and banana peel still clutched in his shaking hands. The journey felt like traveling through time. Every bump in the road mirrored the knots in his muscles. Every passing field reminded him of lost years. When he finally reached the crumbling homestead at twilight, the neem tree stood ominously larger than he remembered, its roots bulging through the earth like veins. As he knelt to dig where the roots converged, his fingernails scraping against something smooth and metallic, a voice behind him rasped, "I wondered when you'd come back." Rajendra spun to see the village's ancient midwife leaning on her stick, her milky eyes gleaming. "Your wife didn't just leave notes," she whispered. "She left medicine, the kind no doctor could give you." The old woman pointed to the half-buried metal box now visible in the dirt, its surface etched with symbols Leela had studied in secret before her death. Rajendra's breath came in shallow gasps as understanding dawned. His wife had been learning traditional healing arts during those last months, hiding more than grief beneath her quiet smiles. The midwife's next words turned his blood to ice. "But the box isn't for your legs. It's for what comes after you heal them." Thunder rumbled in the distance as the first monsoon clouds gathered, carrying the scent of wet earth and long-buried secrets. The metal box clicked open with unnatural ease, releasing a scent of dried neem leaves and something metallic, like old coins and monsoon soil. Inside lay 3 startling objects: a vial of murky liquid stoppered with beeswax, Arv's tiny bronze wrist bell still crusted with river mud, and a folded hospital report dated 2 weeks before Leela's death. Rajendra's vision swam as he read the diagnosis: advanced motor neuron degeneration mimicking arthritis, the very condition doctors now said was causing his cramps. But Leela's handwritten note at the bottom changed everything. They're wrong. It's not degeneration. It's retention. The body remembers what the mind cannot bear. The midwife suddenly grabbed his wrist, her grip shockingly strong. Your pain was never just grief, she hissed. When you pulled Arav from that river, you absorbed more than trauma. The water gave you something. Before Rajendra could process this, the first monsoon raindrop struck the rusted box lid with a sound like ringing bells, and the liquid in the vial began glowing faintly green. The midwife recoiled, making a warning sign. She didn't just study healing, she breathed. She studied transfer. Rajendra's legs erupted in fire as distant thunder shook the ground, but it wasn't thunder. The neem tree's roots were moving, uncoiling from the earth like awakened serpents, revealing hollows filled with hundreds of identical vials, each tagged with names from the village. The midwife staggered back in horror. Gods forgive her. Leela didn't just document your pain. She collected it. Rain sluiced down the tree's bark, washing away decades of dirt to expose carvings. A sprawling family tree where every branch ended in a tiny bell-shaped mark. Rajendra's cramping muscles locked rigid as understanding struck. The bells weren't symbols. They were counters. Somewhere in the storm, a child's laughter echoed. Not Arav's, but terrifyingly familiar. The midwife crossed herself. The river never gives back what it takes, unless something equal is offered instead. Rajendra's hand flew to his throat as another spasm hit, this time carrying a wet, gurgling sensation he hadn't felt since that fateful dive into the river's depths. The glowing vial rolled toward him of its own accord, stopping against his shoe as the roots began slithering closer. The last thing he saw before the pain swallowed his vision was the hospital report fluttering open to reveal a final underlined phrase. Symptoms notably worsened during high humidity. Monsoon wasn't just a season here. It was a reckoning. Rajendra's scream merged with the howling wind as the roots coiled around his ankles, their touch burning like ice. The glowing vial shattered against his skin, releasing not liquid but a whispering mist that formed shapes above his writhing body. A miniature storm cloud crackling with memories. Suddenly he wasn't just feeling his own pain, but Leela's too, the crushing weight of her silent vigils by his sickbed, the way her hands had trembled while preparing his meals, the bitter herbs she'd secretly crushed into his tea for years. The vision shifted, revealing terrifying gaps in his own memory. Leela leading him sleepwalking to this very tree, pressing his palms against its bark while chanting. Leela arguing with the midwife about sacrifice ratios, as they pored over leather-bound ledgers filled with children's names. The roots tightened as the mist solidified into a monstrous truth. Arav's accident hadn't been an accident at all. The river took children only when ancient debts came due, and Rajendra's family line owed dearly. His cramping legs weren't failing him. They were becoming something else, their muscles writhing with the same unnatural movement as the roots, his bones creaking with the same terrible purpose as the neem tree's branches. The midwife was chanting now, not in fear but in grim ceremony, as the earth beneath them began yielding up more metal boxes, each identical to Leela's, each bearing the insignia of different village families. Rajendra's mouth filled with the taste of river water as his body convulsed, but through the agony came one crystalline realization. The vials weren't medicine. They were contracts. The cramp in his left calf suddenly split open with a sickening pop, but instead of blood, thick neem sap bubbled forth, and with it came Arav's voice, not from the past but from the very roots encircling him. Papa, you have to choose. Her or me. Behind him, the crumbling homestead's door creaked open, revealing a silhouette too tall and thin to be human, its arms outstretched in terrible welcome. The midwife fell to her knees, not in prayer but in predatory anticipation, her milky eyes now glowing the same venomous green as the shattered vial. Rajendra understood at last why Leela had really died. Not from illness, but from harvesting too much pain. The tree didn't just store suffering. It fed on it. And now, after 30 years of cultivation, the feast was ready. His legs moved without his command, carrying him toward the thing in the doorway as the first true monsoon downpour erased all footprints behind him, including the small, child-sized ones freshly pressed into the mud near the riverbank. Rajendra's body moved with unnatural jerks as the roots puppeteered him toward the shadowy figure in the doorway. His left foot sank into the mud up to the ankle, except it wasn't mud anymore, but a thick, pulsating mass of hair-like roots that began stitching themselves into his flesh. Through the agony, his clearing vision revealed the horrific truth about the village. Every neem tree here grew at a precise distance from homes, each marking where a child had been returned by the river after their family made a trade. The silhouette in the doorway solidified into a monstrous parody of Leela, her face half-rotted, her outstretched arms ending in branching fingers that mirrored the tree's limbs. But the real horror lay in what she cradled against her chest, a squirming bundle wrapped in riverweed that emitted faint, familiar bell sounds. The midwife's chanting rose to a shriek as Rajendra's right leg suddenly snapped backward at the knee with a sound like breaking branches. His bones were forming into something that could climb, something that belonged to the tree now. Yet in that moment of ultimate violation, his mind finally accessed the sealed memory Leela had buried in him. The ritual 30 years ago when he'd unknowingly participated in trading Arv's life for his own failing health. The river didn't steal children. Parents gave them willingly. The thing wearing Leela's face unrolled the wheat bundle to reveal not Arv's remains, but hundreds of tiny bronze bells threaded on a nerve-like cord, each representing a stolen childhood. As the first bell touched Rajendra's transformed leg, his mouth unhinged like a snake's to release a guttural scream that wasn't entirely human. But somewhere beneath the torment came the distant, desperate ringing of a single bell moving against the current, a sound that made even the false Leela hesitate. The roots convulsed as something far beneath the ground stirred in response, something the ritual wasn't meant to awaken. The midwife's triumphant expression shattered into genuine terror as fresh cracks spread through the earth, revealing glimpses of smooth, egg-like formations glowing with the same green intensity as the vials, except these weren't made of glass. They were cocoons, and they were hatching. Rajendra's body froze mid-transformation as the cocoons split open with a sound like snapping bones. Instead of monsters, luminous figures emerged, children made of shimmering river mist, each carrying a tiny bell. The false Leela shrieked and withered back into the shadows as the spectral children formed a circle around Rajendra, their bells ringing in perfect harmony. The sound unraveled the roots from his legs, the neem sap retreating like frightened serpents. One glowing child stepped forward, Arv's spirit, but not as Rajendra remembered. This version of his son had grown up, his eyes holding centuries of wisdom. "Papa," he whispered, "the river doesn't want our pain. It wants us to let go." As he touched Rajendra's forehead, decades of grief poured out in a single breath, not into the tree, but into the monsoon rain, where it dissolved into the earth harmlessly. The other spirit children began merging with their living relatives across the village, breaking the ancient cycle of traded suffering. The midwife collapsed, her stolen years catching up all at once as the last of the cursed vials shattered. When the dawn came, Rajendra found himself kneeling by the riverbank, his legs weak but human again, cradling only a single bronze bell in his palms. Back in the city, Mira would wake to find her grandfather's Cramps gone, along with every neem tree in their ancestral village, leaving only fertile soil where they'd stood. Moral lesson: the body does remember what the mind tries to forget, not to punish us, but to remind us that true healing begins when we face our pain instead of burying it. No ritual can erase grief, but acceptance can transform it into wisdom.